Over the years, elections in Africa and some few African countries have been termed as democratic, with others regarded as a thorn in the flesh of some countries, as they have experienced pre-elections, elections and post-elections drama, which have resulted in the arrest, torture and many more. Today, August 24th, 2022, Angolans are heading to the polls to elect their next president and members of the National Assembly. Incumbent President João Lorenzo of the ruling Popular Movement for the Liberation of Angola MPLA party is hoping for a second term in office after he has governed the oil-rich country since 2017. Elections in countries like Kenya, Ghana, Rwanda, just to cite these few, have been termed democratic, with most recently Kenya proving the contrary, with the issue of Raila Odinga, opposition leader, contesting the results. According to a study carried out by the Marcaston Institute, there are always international actors in the endeavors of a country trying to promote democratic change. On today's edition of Voice It, we shall be understanding to what extent elections on the African continent can deliver on democracy. Stay with us. Greetings once more, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you immensely for joining us on today's edition of Voice It over your Pan-African channel for you media. Of course, today we are talking elections on the African continent, and of course, elections is at a time when Angolans are heading to the polls to vote for the next president as well as members of the National Assembly. And joining us all the way from the United States of America, precisely Washington this afternoon, is Dr. GNAKA LAGOKE. He's a Pan-Africanist as well as a political analyst. Good day, sir. Greetings, Dr. GNAKA. Okay, we're going to kick off, but before we come down into analyzing today's topic of discussion, I'd like you to take a listen to this detailed report compiled to us by a news conference. Amid pre-elections and post-elections drama recorded in most African countries, Angolans are heading to the polls in what is expected to be the closest election since the country first allowed a multi-party vote in 1992. The key question is whether voters will once again pick the left-wing People's Movement for Liberation of Angola MPLA, which has run the country for half a century, or back the centre-right National Union for Total Independence UNITA under the charismatic Abdebeto Costa Jr., and if it will serve on democracy. The MPLA party is currently heard by incumbent President João Lorenzo and derives most of its support from its roles in ending Angola's 1975 to 2000 civil war against UNITA. The two anti-colonial guerrilla movements were locked in a struggle following Angola's independence from Portugal in 1975. But high unemployment, corruption, and the repression of civil liberties has hit the country's popularity amongst the youth. Tensions have always grown between political parties and the opposition, especially when it comes to elections, and consequently it leads to violence, arrest of political figures. Going down memory lane, post-election tensions in Ivory Coast led to the death of over 3,000 people after former leader Laurent Gbagbo refused to concede defeat. Most recently is that of Kenya, where a few hours to the result proclamation, there was confrontation, and recently we saw opposition leader Raila Odinga contesting the results after the Independent Electoral and Boundary Commission declared William Ruto winner of the country's August 9 polls, contrary to the fact it was termed as one of the most peaceful and democratic on the continent. All of these is to say that the chances of elections serving as a litmus paper for democracy are slim. Nonetheless, chances are time could change the hands of things. Having listened to that report, it's high time I welcome our guest joining us all the way from Washington, Dr. GNAKA LAGOKE. Greetings once more, sir.
Morning. Thanks for having me. So the first question I'd like to ask you this afternoon is, in your opinion, what do you think is democracy?
Oh, okay. Democracy can be defined as a system of governance whereby the people have the ability to choose their own representatives. And then the type of democracy that we know today is a representative democracy. And then people go to the polls and they choose a president and they choose members of the parliament. And then this is what we've been seeing. And then the greatest, or maybe the first major example in our modern history, has been the United States of America, when they succeeded in defeating the British Crown, when the world, or when Europe was under the system of monarchy. The United States of America, even though slavery was in force, they spoke about the government of the people, by the people, and then they mentioned the concept of democracy. And then that model was going to become very important, like in world history. Of course, in England, there was already a different type of system called constitutional monarchy, after the Glorious Revolution. But the United States came with the concept of democracy, which is not a new concept, but they've revived it. And then since that time, many in the world are going to the polls, electing the officials, and this is what we've been seeing. This is how we can define democracy. Completely different in a republic, different from a monarchy, from totalitarianism, from fascism, and many other ideologies or systems that can lead to systems in which people are oppressed and deprived from the civil and then the liberties.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nyaka, for that elaborate definition. Of course, today we are discussing this issue because Angolans are heading to the polls to vote for their new president, as I earlier mentioned, as well as members of their National Assembly. Lately, we have witnessed the elections that took place in Kenya. So, what assessment, what analysis do you make of elections on the African continent as a whole?
Oh yeah, of course, we are moving. We are moving in the right direction. In the aftermath of when the founding fathers of the African nations, when they conquered independence, because they wanted to reduce tensions and division in those respective African countries, all of them across the board, they agreed on the one-party system, even though during colonial time, in several countries, just to mention Ivory Coast and Ghana, there were a multi-party system. And then, so the one-party system has been enforced, and then with diverse fortunes. And then later on, there was going to be the wind of democratization that started in Asia, and that was going to blow across the world and on the continent of Africa. And that wind of democratization coincided with the liberation of Nelson Mandela in 1990, February 11, 1990. And then that year, there were a mass protest in Africa. I was a student, and then as a student, I played that role with many, and then we wanted more freedom, and then we requested a multi-party system in Ivory Coast, and then everywhere, in many other African countries, see the same thing happened, and people organized several national conferences in order to build the new African countries with the multi-party system. But there were some cases that were better, some of them were not as great. But it is difficult today for Africa to go back to the one-party system. So that is one positive thing that, we can talk about. But the second element that I always talk about when I'm having conversations on democracy is that the election is the reflection of the state of democracy in a country. I'm going to say that again. The election that people praise so much is generally the reflection of the state of democracy in a country. In other words, if like the country, the leadership and the people, they are not engaged in order to foster and to make democracy a reality. When they go to the polls, the elections are going to become the reflection of how the society has been functioning. The same thing happened in Ivory Coast. The same thing is happening in Kenya. The same thing is happening in Angola. This is what we know. And yes, election is the organization of election is very important, but the most important thing is to advance the cause of freedom and justice in the society, and then fair and transparent election can only be the outcome of the evolution of democracy in the society.
From one topic to the next, I'd like to ask you, having followed your definition of democracy in Africa, I'd like to ask you, what are the criteria that constitute an acceptable election that can actually lead to democratic governance in various African countries?
Well, the first one is that when the winner and then the loser agree that the elections were fair. I know that sometimes leaders in the opposition can, out of bad faith, even though they can be real losers, they can still denounce a fraud. But the first criterion is to say, you know what, when somebody has lost and he says, I have lost, and everyone agrees on the outcome of an election, that is the first thing. But before that, people have to agree on the electoral listing, because in several countries, voters are not on the electoral list because of those who want to rig the election. They use that as a way of, in order to expel some people from the electoral list. That's the first thing. Number two, people have to agree on the process. It means that the electoral listings and then the way the elections are going to be conducted. And number three, the day of the results, people have to agree on the data that come from the different voting regions. So when we see consensus and common agreement on every step of the process, and then people agree on the results, then we can say that the election was a successful election.
So away from that, now Angolans are heading to the polls, and of course the country, which is an oil-rich country, is facing economic crises as repercussions from the war in Ukraine. Do you think these elections can actually lead to the liberation of this nation, given its economic impasse?
The situation in Angola, it is I don't like to talk about Africa like that, but it's unfortunate because they had the opportunity to be a real developed country in Africa, given the fact that there was a time oil was booming, and they had it, and then even today with the war in Ukraine, we know that the oil prices are skyrocketing. So they have that resource, but the news that we receive from Angola are not always beautiful news, because as you know, as it was described in the report, as we read, Even though the current president tried in order to fight against corruption, but the country is still suffering from corruption. And then there is that unfair distribution of resources in Angola. And then if today the Angolans are thinking about taking out of power the MPLA, then it means that there is a high level of dissatisfaction in the country. And then the current president, even though he tried to go after the family of the former president Eduardo dos Santos, I think that he has not responded to the expectations of the people in the country. And so this election can be things can change, but I am not because I don't know the challenger who is trying to become the president. I cannot anticipate and say the person when he comes is going to be like Thomas Sankara or is going to be like Kwame Nkrumah, because that is the type of leaders we need to see in Africa. People who are selfless, people who care about the country, people who are willing to put the resources of the countries at the disposal of the African masses. And then until then, everything that we're doing, we are not doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. You said it all, that the leaders of today can never ever be like those of in those days, like you cited Kwame Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara, just to name these few. But again, we know that there's just this statement that South African President Cyril Ramaphosa once said, that Africa has made a lot of progress when it comes to elections, transparency, and democracy. So now, what do you think needs to be done, given what we are seeing in Kenya at the moment with Raila Odinga contesting the results, which was earlier termed as one of the most democratic on the African continent?
Yes, like I said, people, when we talk about the elections, we want to see, because I have spoken, because of what I do, I read, but I've spoken to people on the ground during the election in Kenya. And then the reality is that I think 4 out of 7 members of the Electoral Commissions did not agree with the result that were about to be. So we cannot say that the election was transparent. People can go to the polls, they can vote, but now when people comes now to count the votes, and then the president of the Electoral Commission, he wants to give the results, and the other members do not agree, then there is an issue. So we cannot say that the election in Kenya was that democratic. That is the first element. The second thing, I think people have to continue the struggle. People have to continue the battle. Because democracy, people have to know democracy as always, and will always be an unfinished business. I am here in the United States, seen as the beacon of democracy in the world. And then we know that last year, this year, when Donald Trump lost the election, we saw that Trump was about to change the outcome of the elections, or that his people went to the Capitol because they thought they were doing the right thing, doing the revolution for Trump to be in power. So what does it mean? It means that are not infallible. Human beings, they have those temptations. When somebody has power, he is tempted in order to abuse the power that he has. Therefore, people have to try and put into place systems to prevent the abuses of power in the society. So what happens here is happening in different parts of the world. It is only when we have people with a high level of consciousness, people who are thinking about the interests of nations, people who are thinking about the interests of people. It is only when we have those people, they can say, you know what, I lost the election, I can leave power. In the case of Nigeria, Jonathan Goodluck, when he lost the election, he was was not willing to go. He did not want to leave power. Even Obasanjo that we talk about today, Obasanjo wanted to change the constitution in Nigeria to be in power for a third term. And Nigeria was about to experience another civil war. So for me, people have to go through the struggle, and it is not just some individuals. We talk about all the constituencies in the society, political leaders, and then civil society, and many other groups. They have to make sure that they fight and they preserve democracy, because if we don't have democracy the way it is, then it is going to become complicated. We may go back to some unending and some eternal cycles of violence in the society. Now, do not get me wrong. I am not saying that the model of the model that we are experiencing is a perfect one. I'm not saying that. That's why people have to work to perfect that model. In the case of Africa, maybe not today, another time, we can have a conversation about what could be that model of democracy that can fit in the African realities. That's another conversation.
So, if I've listened to you, you will say that elections probably is not really a true test of democracy in Africa. Apart from elections, what other measures do you think African governments can put in place in order for a democratic governance to finally pull through?
Oh, okay. So as you ask the question, let's go for it. So the first, the thing that people have to do, and I said it a little bit. I think that when somebody's in power, and then if the leader wants to think about the needs of the masses, is to try and attend to the needs of the people. That is basic. Lula da Silva from Brazil, when he was about to leave power, he had 80% of the approval rating in Brazil. Why? Because in Brazil, good politics, it is about meeting the needs of the people. I know in some African countries, people try to do that. We have Botswana, we have the example of Mauritius, I understand that, but I'm talking about the case of Lula because I read and then I can quote that doing good politics is about meeting the needs of the people. So that is what every African president should be doing. Instead of thinking about self-enrichment, or instead of thinking about meeting the needs of multinationals, instead of thinking about giving all the contracts to foreign companies, the first thing is to meet the needs of the people, providing health care, building schools, then many other things. And then beside that, there should be a fair redistribution of resources. That is the second thing. Now, even the model of democracy, the way we see it in Africa, because in the United States here, it is the winner takes all. Whoever wins the election imposes rule, and then he appoints his people everywhere. This is what people think that this is how democracy should be. But there are several ways, to implement a democratic system in a country. In the case of Africa, we need to try and find the middle ground between the needs of the minority and then the rule of the majority. I'm not saying that people should build, they should put together some national union government. That's not what I'm saying. But they have to find a way to build that new social contract, that kind of consensus, so that even those who have lost the election can be involved in the management of the country. But if we don't do that, those who are going to be in the opposition, they're going to feel ostracized, and they're going to try and do everything possible to prevent the ones who are in power to succeed, so that they can have a chance to come to power. So now we can think about the system that needs to be redesigned in Africa. And then one of the things I always talk about I think that we need to have two chambers in the parliament in Africa. One chamber can be composed of the representatives of political parties, and the other chamber can be composed of different constituencies in the society. For instance, the farmers. In Ivory Coast, the farmers represent 60%, they provide 60% of the resources of the country, but they are nowhere to be found when people are taking some decisions of voting some law, adopting and voting some laws that are going to have an impact in the social and economic activities. So this is something that I can propose, and then of course another time we can give more details.
Okay, given a situation where African leaders has yet to find a common ground, as you earlier mentioned, with regards to elections leading to democracy, if we are still to stay on elections, this way of elections, what measures do you think could be put in place to ensure that the elections that are being held in different African countries definitely should lead to democracy?
No, I think the burden on this, though, the burden is not on the leaders. I'm telling you, the people in power. Because you have to, I'm saying that, you know, some people can be in power. And like I said, there are so many temptations. And then, like, how can I say it? Let's say somebody goes to school, and then the person wants to have to succeed, and the person studies, and then the person goes there and the person cannot fail or cannot succeed, or the person has the impression that he is failing the exam. As a human being, you may be tempted, if you do not have strong values, you may be tempted, you know, to go and cheat in order for you to pass the exam. That is the same thing that is happening to those who are in power. It's not like there are many of them. It's not like they are like Sassou Nguesso or Blaise Compaoré or many other leaders. It's not like all the leaders are like that. There are some who want to do the right thing, and then somehow, maybe because, you know, they are not that great, things happen, and now they can start thinking about how they're going to remain in power. Here in the United States, when Obama was in power, the first term of Obama, I was like compromising too much because he was already thinking about his second term. And then because of that, like he failed to deliver on some of his promises. So my point is that the burden for a true democratic society in a country has to be on those who really want the country to live by the democratic principles. You cannot count on the Afrikaners in South Africa who were leading South Africa in the context of apartheid to all of a sudden understand, you know, the beauty of freedom, or you cannot count on them, you know, to be to have an epiphany and say, you know what, we have oppressed and exploited those black people so long, but now it is time for us in order to give them freedom. No, it was the resilience, the consistency of the people who were fighting. It was the determination of people in South Africa, across the board. First, black people and many others, the Indians, even some white people. It was the mobilization of the leaders in Africa, the mobilization of freedom fighters and then justice seekers across the globe, and from all walks of life and from all races. They were the one who imposed the one man, one vote, for which Mandela went to prison in 1964. He went to prison because of that. The coup d'etat attempt that he did, it is because they wanted to change the rule under the leadership of the white supremacists. So my point is that the burden is on those who want countries to live by the democratic principles. If they succeed, if they do well, then we can see democracy like in the society. And now when people who want democracy in the society, when they take power and they do not change and they really abide by the democratic principles, then we can hope to see democracy as a cardinal value in those African societies. If not, let's see. I don't want to give some other too many examples, but I just want to stop there.
Okay, no problem. You said the burden is not just on the African leaders, but it's probably on those that want to eradicate all this. Oh, just to ask you, you know that Africans, us as Africans, we are those that elect those that become our leaders. So as Africans, as the population, what role do we have to play in ensuring that elections, smooth elections are being run and consequently they lead to democracy?
Yeah, so as I want to continue on this on the previous question, so if I want to say that in other words, the people, the freedom fighters, justice seekers, democracy lovers, if I can use that expression, when I say that the burden is on them, I also wanted to say that they should make the leaders do the right thing. So if people are not invested in the management of the countries, if they are dissatisfied, if they care less about who wins or who does not win, if they are not themselves good citizens, because that is the conversation. And being a good citizen is not just about going to the polls and vote. Being a good citizen is about educating oneself about the affairs of the world, the affairs of the country. Being a good citizen, it is about caring for the community. Being a good citizen, it is about taking care of cleaning like the communities or neighborhoods. It is about trying to meet the needs of the people like that you can in your community. So if you have that kind of heart, and if you have that kind of perspective, therefore you will care about who is going to be in power, because you know that the decision he's going to take or she's going to take are going to affect you as an individual, or the decision are going to affect now the collective, or the decision are going to affect the communities in which the good citizens are supposed to be living. So this is how I see it, and people have to be involved, and be the youth or the different people have to be involved in the democratic processes. Election is just one step, but before people go to the election, people should be there checking, inquiring, controlling, raising the awareness. And I think that this is what people should be doing.
Okay, according to a research carried out by the Michelson Institute, it states that there are always international actors when it comes to a country trying to bring about democratic governance in their respective nations. So now, how do you term this, given that most elections, most African countries are trying as much as possible to be independent?
Yeah. Last time when we had the debate, and it was a very interesting element. I think it was Ella. I spoke about that a bit, but it was the one who really spoke about it, and it's a very important piece when in the conversation about democracy in Africa. We have to know that the system in which we are is called neo-colonialism. And then Kwame Nkrumah wrote a book on that in 1965. And then when he was defining neocolonialism, he was talking about leaders in power, and then whose policies and then were conceived from outside forces and imposed on African leaders. The same thing is happening when we are looking at the election in Africa. To mention, for instance, the case of France. France wants to control its former colonies, and then France will do everything possible in order to impose the candidates that are going to advance the hegemony and then the neo-colonial agenda of France. That's why France supported the former president of Mali, Ibeka, and that's why France is opposed to Assimi Goïta. Because France want to see in power Macky Sall or somebody who can come from Macky Sall's rank. And then France does not want Ousmane Sonko, who is the rising star of politics in Senegal, to be in power because he's a nationalist and then somehow he's advancing Pan-Africanism. So we see that, and then it is happening over and over. And then again, like I said, the same way those who want to see democracy to triumph in the society, if the burden is on them, that's the same way the burden is on them to reduce the neo-colonial interferences of France or any neo-colonial power in the domestic affairs of Africa or in the organization of elections in Africa.
Thank you so much, Dr. NYAKA. We have recently just been joined by Mr. ELVIS TAYONG. He is a political analyst joining us all the way from the southwest region of Cameroon. You're welcome, sir.
Well, thanks very much. It's my pleasure. I apologize for coming in late. Probably had some network wahalas and booyah. But I think I'm happy being with you on the program. It's my pleasure being here today.
Okay, the first question I would like to ask you this afternoon is Angolans today are heading to the polls to vote for the next president after incumbent President Joao Lorenzo is heading in for a second term, and of course they are equally going to vote for members of their National Assembly. Do you really think that these elections that are about to be held there in Angola, as well as others that have held on the African continent, could possibly serve as a litmus test for democracy on the continent? Mr. ELVIS TAYONG?
Yeah.
Yes, I was saying...
I think...
right on, sir.
Yeah, I think Angola, they don't have a good history for democracy. It's the same kind of one for SADC, for other countries, a little bit within the SADC zone. South Africa is doing well, but not very well as per se.
Okay, we've just got indications that the network issues are really not the best at Mr. ELVIS TAYONG's end, but we're going to quickly ride on with Dr. NYAKA. Dr. NYAKA, you earlier mentioned that African leaders don't have the burden to carry alone because other parties have to play a role in order to ensure that elections on the African continent possibly lead to democracy, and the one that even the future generations can be able to be proud of. So what measures do you think, apart from all this, what role does African leaders have to play? Because definitely they are the ones that guide the country through all this.
Like I said in the beginning, answering one of your first questions, I spoke about how from the one-party system to the multi-party system in Africa, we can see that Africa is changing. So, of course, we may see leaders ruling with iron fist, like Patrice Talon in Benin, even though we are in a context of multi-party system. We can see Alassane Dramane Ouattara in Ivory Coast ruling like a king, even though there are many other political parties that exist. So this is what we see. But there are some leaders, and then I've given some examples, like Jonathan Goodluck, who knew he lost the election, and then who could have stayed in power, but who thought about it, but who understood that it was an uphill battle, and then who decided, to relinquish power. So we have some positive examples on the continent of Africa. So we cannot, in the case of South Africa, I think Felix was talking about South Africa. In the case of South Africa, even though many people seem to be disappointed with what the ANC is doing as a leading political party, but we know that over there democracy is functioning really functioning, and within the ANC, lost the trust of his party. Then they asked him to leave power. Same thing happened to Zuma. And then today we have Cyril Ramaphosa, who is there as the president of South Africa. And they're going to go, I think this year, to organize, to see who is going to be the leader of the ANC. And then whoever becomes the leader, then is likely to become the president of South Africa. Over there, the system is functioning. So, so we want to see many examples like that on the continent of Africa. And then we want to see leaders who should understand that the cry of the African masses, because today there is a new awakening of the Pan-African consciousness on the continent of Africa. We can see that many African masses, the youth, many other people, they want a new Africa, and then therefore leaders should understand that they need to adjust in order to advance, the interests or the needs of the people.
Thank you immensely for that elaborate contribution. You earlier said that most of the colonial masters are still trying to control the various heads of state in power. But then, away from that, how can Africans hold elections without interference from their possible colonial masters?
Can you repeat that? My net was acting up here. So can you repeat your question, please?
Yes, I was saying in line with what you earlier said, that former colonial masters are still trying in as much as possible to impact various elections that are held in different countries. What do you think Africans can do in order to hold elections free of the interference of their former colonial masters?
Okay, yeah, the first element is that people have to raise the awareness. And against neocolonialism. This is what we're doing. This is what you are doing, Sharon, and with this channel and many others on different channels. Those who believe in a new Africa, we have to raise the awareness because we are. If we say that we are independent, we should be able to be proud to be independent. And then we should be able to do things in order to reduce the interference of the neocolonial forces. So that is the first thing that we have to do. So when we have many people in the country or in the countries who are willing to fight for their freedoms, who are willing to die for their liberty, who are willing to defend, the countries, from neocolonial interferences, then we can hope to see that they can really act as good citizens. They can act as people who are going to do things in a very independent way. That is the first thing that I see. The second element is that people have to reduce the dissensions in the society. It is because the dissensions exist. It is because we have not resolved our differences. That's why external forces can play some against the others. So it means that this is going to be on the leaders and the people who are not in power to understand that at least we can agree on some common ground, and then when we do that, then we should be working in order to reduce the interference of the Europeans. The third element is to see justice in the society, justice for all, not for some. And then we can see, number 4, we can see, and I've mentioned that in the beginning, a fair redistribution of resources. It is also a mechanism to reduce the dissensions in the society. When we do that, then we can say, you know what, we can see that the European may not succeed in the desire to come and manipulate the elections or manipulate the electoral process or trying to interfere in the electoral processes in Africa.
Thank you so much for those 3 steps. But then I would like to ask you, we have seen records of pre-elections as well as post-elections violence in different African countries. How can this be put to an end, given the fact that it's this population that are being affected that have to vote for new presidents?
Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, I was saying that we have seen records of colonial pre-elections as well as post-elections in different African countries across the continent. But then these elections, these persons that are being tortured or being violated upon their rights are being dealt with are persons that have to vote for the new president. How do you what's your take on this?
Okay, maybe I'm not sure if I understand it, but I think it goes by, it boils down to justice in the society. It boils down to doing what needs to be done in order to reinforce a sense of justice and then a sense of inclusion in the society. So when we understand that the citizens who have been oppressed, or the citizens who are victims of discrimination and abuses, are not foreigners, but they are also members of the society. And then the person who is in power has to understand that the policies has to be there for everyone. This is what I was talking about, justice for all. And then I think that that's the only way to contribute to advance to the advancement of democracy in the society. I don't know if I understood your question.
Okay, so the question I would like to ask you before we quickly wrap up today's edition is, these persons, for example, we have the arrest and imprisonment, possible imprisonment of opposition figures, so to say, even the populace that go to the streets to probably violate or say protest what they are not happy with. Say if the government have to organize some kind of reconciliation between the population and those in power, will this bring about a stop to this election violence that actually takes place in different African countries?
Yeah, it is not about the organization of National Reconciliation Fora. It is not. It is the principle is important, but before the principle, we have to see sincerity. You know, if we have to see sincerity, and if people those who are in power wants to organize those type of National Reconciliation Fora, they have to be sincere. And then it is when they are sincere, then they allow everyone to come and speak. In the case of Ivory Coast, when the Gbagbo Laurent organized the National Reconciliation Forum, even though we welcomed the National Reconciliation Forum, even though some thought that the National Reconciliation was a great success, but there was one thing that I say, which is the following. During the National Reconciliation Forum in Ivory Coast, there was no victimizer, and all the people who spoke, all of them, they presented themselves as victims. So then that's an issue. So when I talk about sincerity, people have to be sincere enough to see like a real conversation in the country, and those who made mistakes should be able, to confess their faults, and then so that people can have they can try to think about a new social contract. So that is the most important thing. And then if the conditions are met, and then if the various groups have agreed on the modus operandi of the National Reconciliation Forum, now what we're going to see is going to become a logical outcome of the preconditions, of the successful preconditions that led or that will lead to a successful National Reconciliation Forum.
In your opinion, what do you think is the way forward from all this?
First of all, we cannot go back to the one-party system. I know I've seen many Africans saying, "Oh, the democracy is not working, but we have to go back to the one-party system, or we have to go back to the pre-colonial political systems." There was a king, and then when he dies, he was replaced by his son. So I do not agree with that. I think that democracy has become today a universal value, cherished by people everywhere in the world, and then we may not agree on the definition of democracy or on the definitions of democracy, but even in China, they have the way of conducting the affairs of the state using some democratic principles, even though people do not have many parties the way we can see, the way we see the way some other countries like function. So that is the first thing. So we cannot go back to the one-party system. Number two, the democratic system as it is can be perfected, and therefore everyone has to be working in order to advance the cause of democracy. Number three, for democracy, to be sustainable, there should be a form of economic freedom, a form of economic prosperity in the country. That leads me to talk about the fair redistribution of resources in the society. Now, the other point now I want to say is that as Africans, we should be thinking about a new democratic system that can take the best of the European models and that can adapt it, to some positive things of the pre-colonial political system in Africa. The best in the European democratic system is first, we have the existence of political parties. Number two, we have the organization of elections. Number three, we have the separation of powers. Number four, we have the engagement of the civil society. So we can take those elements and then try to see how we can combine them with a very important value, like in the African societies, according to the communal life in Africa, according to the African collectivism, and according to the Ubuntu philosophy that I promote, which is consensus. That's one value, consensus. So people can have all the political parties in the society, but they have to agree on a common ground. For instance, the preservation of the African country, the preservation of our resources, the reduction of corruption in the society, then the satisfaction of the needs of the people, the reduction of enrichment in the society. These are some of the elements around which we can build consensus, irrespective of the dissenting of ideologies in the society. And then, of course, I spoke about the second principle, according to the African communal life, is inclusion. And then I mentioned that when I was talking about the fathers. So this is, for me, the way forward when we want to engage the conversation about democracy in the world and in Africa.
Okay, that's a very powerful one. Before we wrap up today's edition on this very much interesting topic, I'd like to ask you, what if you had to give a message to African leaders and heads of states and governments, so to say, regarding democratic governance in Africa, what would that be?
Oh yes, there is it will be difficult for them to prevent democracy in Africa. Because, like I said, things are changing in Africa, and then a leader can come and put into place a fascist regime. Mr. Ouattara said himself that He wished there was no democracy in Ivory Coast. He said that himself. He does not believe in democracy. There are people like that, but he has to deal with the people. Despite the repression, there are people in the streets. At times, there are people who are denouncing him. So there is no way people can prevent, the evolution of democracy in the society. And then, as history is watching everyone, and then those African leaders, they can have the opportunity to become history makers. They have the opportunity to enter a history by understanding what the people need. Africa wants sovereignty. Africa wants economic and political independence, and Africa wants the end of corruption or the reduction of corruption. So I suggest that the leaders who come there, they do the right thing. They may be looking according to the Carpe Diem philosophy about the now. They may not be thinking about projecting themselves in the future, but they can look at the example of Blaise Compaoré, 27 years in power, enjoying power and life, oppressing and killing his own people. He never thought that one day there will be a time when the people of Burkina Faso were going to rise up and put an end to the regime. He has to go and change his nationality, take the nationality of his wife, the nationality of his wife. When he went to Ivory Coast, the country that he tried to destabilize, and to which he brought a war, and we can see him like defeated by history, living like a poor life in Ivory Coast, and now that guy is going to has been judged, he has been convicted, not only by the tribunal of Burkina Faso, but also by the tribunal of the history. So for us, all those elements is important when people think about the legacy and they think about meeting the needs of the people. This is the type of leaders that we want to see in Africa. Or we want, as we want to quote Gandhi, each one of us should be the change that we want to see in the society.
Okay, with special precision to Angola, whom are heading to the polls today to decide on their future, what would you tell them?
Oh, listen, if whoever wins should become president. If Lorenzo loses the election, he should understand that he has to relinquish power. But more important than that is that as everyone is talking about a tight election, that it means that when or if Lorenzo wins the election, it means that he has to do some fundamental changes in the society. And he cannot just be his own party. He has to try, I call that, we don't see that yet in Africa, but I call that conversation on governance. It's not like National Reconciliation Forum, which is about peace and then reconciliation. The national, like a national governance convention should be put into place, and then invite various representatives of the Angolan society, so that they can discuss about what needs to be done when it comes to economy, to politics, to culture, to society, to spirituality, so that they can have another consensus on that. That's another way of ruling African countries, because if you don't do that, then it's going to be difficult. So let's say, like even Ruto, who won in Kenya, it is the same thing. He did not even have 51%. It means that like more than 49% of the Kenyans voted against him. Half of the country. How are you going to come and impose the will of people who are not even 51% over people who are a little bit above 49% of the society? That's why inclusion and consensus are important in the conversation that we are having. So even if he wins, it is not sufficient because you need to govern. And then what can you do that you have not done in 5 years after going after Dos Santos family? And still, people think that the election is a tactical election. So it means that you have to level up. You have to try and do things differently and better. What does it mean? That you cannot have all the intelligences in your camp. Then you have to go and reach out. And when you reach out, then you are including people in what you want to do. And this is how, that's the type of advice I will give to those African leaders.
Okay. Thank you immensely, Dr. Nyaka, for joining me on today's edition of Voice It.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thanks for the opportunity.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's edition of Voice It over your Pan-African channel for you media. I have been Jakes Nabuse for presentation, of course, stay in company of our programs.